Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on bamboo and hemp, keys to sustainable farming. Today we will be discussing the merits of bamboo and hemp as sustainable building materials for construction and also as carbon sinks. We will also be taking time to discuss design and engineering considerations for these materials. I'm Heather Kimball, Hawaii County Council member and board member of Think Big, the presenters of today's webinar. Think Big is a new Hawaii Island nonprofit that is working to improve our island's sustainability, equity, and resiliency. We focus on renewable energy, waste management, parks and trails, education, and agriculture. This is one of our many webinar series that we've been putting together to help educate the community about some of the key issues regarding sustainability in Hawaii County. I am joined today by our fellow board members, Tam Hunt. Bill Bugby, I think, is actually not here today. Nicole Lowen, Noelle Morin, Jeanette Gehrig, who is going to be our moderator today. Jeanette, over to you.
Thanks so much, Heather, and good afternoon to everybody today. Thanks for joining so much for this webinar. I'm Jeanette Gehrig. I'm the Executive Director of WOCON, which stands for Women Organizing for Change in Agriculture and Natural Resource Management. We are a Kona-based international membership organization working on gender equality in agriculture and natural resource management. And I'm pleased to host this webinar today so we can start this discussion on something we've been thinking and talking about for a long time, which is agricultural products that could be produced here on this island that could help us get further along in our journey towards sustainability, help by reducing carbon intensity, particularly from our construction, and reduce our dependency on imports, create industries and jobs, new streams of revenue for farmers, hopefully, and contribute to the critical carbon sequestration. So we're going to ask in this webinar if you could kindly introduce yourself in the chat and just tell us where you are calling from, and maybe if you'd like to say something about what your interest is in this topic. We will be having a Q&A session after the presenters. So please put those questions you might have as they come to your mind, put those in the chat. We will be pulling those, watching for those in the chat, and read them out during the Q&A session after the panelists are finished speaking. We're giving each panelist about 12 minutes or so to make their presentations. We would ask that right after each presentation, if you have clarifying questions, you can please raise those, but don't raise any larger dialogue or content-related questions. Save those until the end. We will be followed up by, of course, we have a half hour for the Q&A session. Please do stay around for that part. As you well know, that's often the most interesting part of a webinar. And we will be wrapping up at no later than 4:30. So let me now introduce the four panelists that we have here today. First is Bobby Grimes. He is the General Manager for the Hawaii Agriculture, Energy, and Earth Products. Bobby has been around a while doing this organic gardening for over 30 years and has very extensive experience in cultivating hemp and bamboo and using both of these for construction. Following Bobby, we'll have Deborah Todd. She is the owner of Following Bobby, we will have David Sands. He is the founder of two companies, I believe, Rizome and Bamboo Living. And he also has extensive experience in the construction of residential bamboo homes. And he developed the first US building code standard for structural bamboo and has been involved with commercial cultivation of bamboo as well. Deborah Todd will follow David. She is the owner of Building Design Services, Sustainable. She's a building designer. She's based in Kohala. She has experience designing energy efficient homes, including those constructed with hemp-based materials. Deborah is a certified sustainable building advisor and lead accredited professional, and she served on the Build Green board in Bellingham, Washington. Neal Tanaka will close off the session. He is the acting deputy building chief for the County of Hawaii Department of Public Works, and he will be here to discuss permitting considerations for sustainable building materials. So thanks again to all who are joining, and let's begin by having Bobby present aspects as where it all begins at the growth and the processing of both bamboo and hemp. Bobby, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Jeanette. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. I get to talk about something that I'm really passionate about, which is growing bamboo and also utilizing hemp for its unique characteristics as well. Can we get to, we could skip over a couple slides and a couple more, one more, and we'll start at the next slide. So one of the things that's amazing about bamboo is how much of the biomass that bamboo can grow on an acre of land, and the fact that it just keeps producing these poles every year that you harvest it. And it grows on such denuded soil, it grows in so many different climates. And then, as you can see, it can take rainfall from so few to very, very high rainfall. One of the things about bamboo is its biomass that is so it's such a prolific plant that as you harvest every year, it keeps putting up new shoots, and there's just so many uses for it. So you can go to the next slide. I've been involved in growing bamboo myself and treating it and getting into the whole process of it. One of the things that I found so amazing about it is how resilient it is, whether the weather is really, really dry or whether it's super rainy. Your bamboo is always going to, be very resilient. It's also real effective at taking out toxic substances from the soil and storing them inside of the poles. You can look at all the different damaged, overgrazed soils that we have here, and bamboo is an awesome plant that we can begin to integrate into farming practices. Next slide. So we've all heard about bamboo and its oxygen production, 4 times more, and carbon dioxide that it stores, and so much more oxygen, maybe 35% more than a deciduous tree forest. Carbon sequestration is something David's going to dive into, but we definitely know that bamboo has an enormous ability to sequester carbon. It's another real good feature of us utilizing it. Next slide. Yeah, bamboo's strength, so much power in the bamboo pole, the fibers, and so much of it can be utilized to replace these fast-growing timber forests that are being clear-cut. Next slide as well. Bamboo is able to be propagated over several different ways. We can take out rhizomes right out of the ground and move them around. We can do air layering, and we can do tissue culture, which is pretty much kind of the cutting edge of where you want to go when you find a really good bamboo that suits your area, your climate, and your need, your market. You can tissue culture it in a lab and gain this massive amount of propagation in a very easy way. So bamboo shoots as well. So if a bamboo clump is growing, maybe it puts out 15 shoots each year, and we're going to let maybe 8 of those go through to become poles, and the rest of them we're going to call into shoots for food. And you can see here, just in this one statistic, Taiwan consumes 80,000 tons of shoots annually. That's a $50 million industry, and if you look at Thailand, it's even more. So it's a huge resource for us. Right now, they're just going to waste mostly. So that's another area. There is a farm in Australia that does this and has created a niche market where they're just selling literally thousands and thousands of pounds of shoots every year. He's done an amazing job there. Let's go next. So we're going to be talking about the clumping bamboo here, mostly in my presentation, as well as in David's. And there's another type, running, that has a bad rap because it tends to go underground and spread and can take over quite a large area. But basically what we'll be focusing on here are the clumping varieties that stay in a relatively tight area for a long period of time. And the clump can live over 50 years and never spread much more than 25 feet in a circle. So it's a really useful plant that allows you to propagate and harvest and stuff in a very tight area. You could lay out a plantation, and you know where the plants are going to be, similar to like a mango or something. It's going to stay in a tight area in a nice row. It's easier to manage for weed control. And I was saying earlier about propagation, you just cut it from a root. You could air layer it. You could tissue culture it. So there's a lot of different ways. It's very easy. It's not a complex thing. Anyone can do it. There's no entry issue there. little bit about the carbon that's happening here and some of the projects. You can have about 150, 125 bamboo plants per acre. So if you imagine you're going to get 8 or 10 poles per plant, and you can do the math for yourself, we can get quite a few poles per acre, and you can start harvesting after about 7 or 8 years. So it's a fascinating idea. I've been working on the idea of capturing the carbon and developing a blockchain ledger system to be able to derive more value from the carbon and feed that back into the education and training for bamboo next. So we'll go on to hemp growing and processing, which is a relatively new area for Hawaii and the United States. You can go back and look at the colonists they had to mandate that they had to grow hemp and send it back to England. 25% of the crop actually was a tax that went back to the king. Of course, that stopped in 1776. And it really didn't get started again until the people in Colorado pushed it. And 2012, they made it legal. And they pretty much were taking on the USDA. And it took till 2014, and the first hemp in the United States was planted in Colorado. And we can go on. The next thing that happened was the USDA got involved. And this is where a lot of people have an issue with hemp, is not understanding the legality of it. So they've created a interim final rule, which is after this farm bill, which had a lot of technical restrictions in it, and it didn't provide a lot of support. Right now, the USDA has come along, go to the next slide, and they've actually created a whole new platform. It's called the Hemp E-Management Platform, which gives a bunch of guidance, and it actually has technical experts in there, and they've really listened to the farmers that were doing this early research about what seeds, what do they need from them, what kind of legislation can happen, and between the states and the federal government. So there's a lot more support coming from the USDA to get into this hemp. Can't really talk about the details of planting hemp and the spacing and the seeds. That's something for a much more detailed workshop. But we do have a lot of different people that are leading the charge here in Hawaii that are practicing, trying all these different varietals of seeds for our different unique conditions that we have here. Go to the next slide. Hemp also is an amazing opportunity for human food production as well as for building products. The seed is an excellent source of protein. The market for seed and hemp seed oil is growing like crazy. My friends in Colorado are selling 55-gallon drums of hemp seed oil, and they're selling seeds. And of course, then they're breeding towards the seed and the strain for these. And they're also able to use the stalk, which has two products in there, the small herd and the large herd, and to decorticate that through a machine and separate those out. And those go into different areas of textiles, paper, and hempcrete, which is something that I'm very, very excited about the future for that here in Hawaii. I think that that, along with bamboo, are going to lead us into a housing revolution in the future where our buildings themselves are securing carbon. They're made locally, all the way down to be able to use the lime, I think, from the Kawaihae Harbor to bind this herd and replace these clamshells and paper. Right now, there are 2 test projects at large paper plants using a mix of up to 40% of hemp herd with their paper production. And it's for fast food, and it's also for large-scale paper making. So there's a factory right now in Michigan and in New York that are the first 2 places that are on a large scale using commercial hemp products in their paper. So it's a real boon. Our kind of goal is to be able to create hemp-based plastic, and then you could use 3D. I was, thinking of bringing in kids, creating a tech incubator lab, letting them, use these 3D printers to make parts for phones and for parts for cars and parts for your computer. And that's another amazing resource that's coming out of the hemp plant, are these bioplastics that can be 3D printed. And Porsche's new car has door panels that are made in part out of hemp fiber. It's finding its way into pretty much every area: laptops, computer, phone, automotive, you name it. There's hemp dashboard, there's hemp parts and seats. They're finding out at the nanoscale that it is superior to some of the man-made graphene technology. So I think that we're just starting to get involved in the hemp, but it's showing great promise in transistors and in batteries as well. So there's, the sky is basically the limit. We're just scratching the surface. If we just get started in 2018, 2019, you can think what happens in 20 years from now. Let's take a look at the next slide. This is kind of my idea has been to kind of learn about this hempcrete and 3D printing. I'm thinking that would be somewhere, and then David's beautiful bamboo rafter systems could be the future for us, where we're creating everything within the local economy, growing it. The carbon's happening in the soil. The ground's getting remediated. Hemp is doing an amazing job remediating the soil. We have an amazing professor here in Hawaii doing research on phytoremediation with the hemp plant. The hemp plant is a real alchemist. It exudes certain acids and chemicals through its roots that are breaking down some of the toxins that have been left over, that are legacy from sugarcane, also from our burning of petrochemicals, which we're still doing on a large scale. And these toxins are very, very long life. And these plants, both bamboo and hemp, are both alchemists at transforming these things and breaking them down so they can be recycled back into the system. Next slide. So we can look at how much grain, and the grain they're referring to the seed, and how much biomass. I have a little bit of a plan. I kind of copied some of it in here to start and learn at 100 acres and scaling it up. We figure it would take about 4,000 acres to get a full CCR, which is a counter current reactor, which is a state-of-the-art hemp processing reactor that was developed with MIT and DARPA. And my friend Ed Lehrberger, who I met in Hilo at the Hawaii Hemp Conference in 2017. And then we've kept in touch, and it's an amazing technology. And so I'm looking forward to the time when we can have full time making hempcrete here and processing bamboo poles and having homes that are more beautiful and more dynamic than a little, a small square that we have as an option right now. Next. So this is Professor King Lee, and you can go ahead. I just wanted to remind myself, next slide, what he has done in the Department of Molecular Biosciences is done research on hemp in Hawaii on remediation and phytoremediation, breaking down atrazine, which is one of the most incipient chemical compounds we've ever created. It is everywhere in every agricultural field. It is no good for us. It's no good for animals. And the hemp plant is taking that apart, which is a fascinating, it's fascinating research. It's a fascinating plant. And the fact that we've got this type of research here in Hawaii and these experiments going on is fantastic. Next slide. There are other chemicals that this glycine that the hemp plant is breaking down is a very toxic chemical. Like once again, a byproduct of burning coal, burning tar, burning the fuels that they're burning down in Hamakua right now. 100,000 gallons of naphtha being burned a day. Below Honoka'a, that stuff's going out in the atmosphere, and this plant has the ability to break this down. So another fantastic reason why we want to promote hemp. Next. Carbon sequestration. People don't really know that much about hemp and carbon sequestration. There haven't been as many studies. There's a little more with bamboo, but there's a growing body of work on carbon sequestration of the hemp plant. And so we can take a look at some of the statistics I decided to pull up here on the 57 million tons in the UK alone in farming in their greenhouse gases. And if you look at, we can get 15 tons of absorption of CO2 per hectare with the hemp crops. And that was 3.1 tons per hectare of embodied emissions you can see how not only does it reverse it, it stores another, 4 times as much carbon offset by farming. And this is including farming the hemp using tractors, processing, etc. So there's just no losing with hemp. It's a winner all the way around. So I think it's excellent for so many different things: human food, plastics, building material, animal feed that we import so much to. I don't think there's a limit to the markets for our farmers. Next. And I think that kind of gives a brief wrap on bamboo and hemp. Can't hear you, Jeanette. You're muted.
I know. Thank you so much, Bobby. Now I really truly understand your tremendous excitement about this. It's phenomenal, from food production to plastic replacement to buildings securing carbon, remediating soil. Yeah, I get it. It's very exciting. We have 1 or 2 minutes for quick clarifying questions. Does anybody have one? If you do, put something in the chat real quickly. Otherwise, we'll move on to David. Who's teed up next? Okay, I'm not seeing anything.
I had one question real quick.
Okay.
This is obviously not a quick answer, but maybe you can give us a very quick summary. Can you tell us a little more about your blockchain-based carbon sequestration efforts, just very briefly?
Wow.
Yeah, it's I'm working on an NFT blockchain project with my friend up here in Kohala, and we're basically focused more on bamboo and doing a plantation up here in Kohala and setting it up from the beginning. And there's a lot of lead time. There's a lot of playing around. So I'm talking with a couple of my folks in Colorado. There are 3 different groups right now that are working on a carbon coin. And we're kind of investigating how they're doing it and where they're getting their numbers, so we can try. We're hoping to make our own, like Kohala coin or Hawaii coin or something for bamboo. I haven't thought about adding it into the hemp because I've been so focused on bamboo, but it's early stuff, and I don't want to say too much about it, but it's something that I'm relatively new to the space, but I have friends up here that are very experienced. So I think that being able to offer that as someone outside that could invest in us to plant more bamboo for watershed. There's people that are interested in so many different things, not just carbon, watershed, arts, textiles, kids in schools getting out, doing this kind of thing, having a better future for them. So that's where we're coming from, is to create some value for people who want to support this through the blockchain, and being able to, actually verify the bamboo plants with GPS type data, right? Instead of selling this forest like they're doing in Brazil or Ecuador or India or Africa 5 times, you'd have one plant, that'd be yours. You'd be sequestering that carbon for forever.
Okay. Thank you, Bobby. We don't have any time for any more clarifying questions. We do see Keith, you've got a question for him. We'll circle back to you later in the Q&A session. David, can we move on to you? And thank you again, Bobby.
Sure, glad to. Yeah. So jumping in is we're using the giant clumping bamboo, the non-invasive versions of bamboo that put out they're the fastest growing woody plants on the planet. And so that's what has really kept our interest in the fact that the plant, you don't kill the plant when you're harvesting it. You're actually continuing to stimulate growth, and you're getting that annual harvest. So the piece for me was I've been working with bamboo, I guess 27 years now. I grew up actually playing in a bamboo, clumping bamboo that's now, well over a century old. And the friend's family, he's working with me on this Rizome company. So it's been, a lifetime experience with it. So you can switch to the next slide. What I did initially was I started a company called Bamboo Living, and we've done hundreds of homes throughout Hawaii. The manufacturing is based in Vietnam, And we took that specific species of bamboo through the building code standard process and got what they call an evaluation services report issued by ICC, who writes 90% of the building codes used in the U.S. It was a multi-year effort and a big 10-year labor of love and a lot of money out of pocket, but we made it through. And since '04, we've been able to get buildings permitted throughout the U.S. Just as a standard, again, an approved building material with the engineering data to back up performance. And we've actually had real on-the-ground performance. Our houses have now been through 4 Category 5s, up to 200-mile-an-hour winds. A project right on the beach in Rarotonga, and then some buildings in St. Croix. So we can go to the next. So what's really got me motivated is, and it's actually what got me started, was I built a house on Maui. It was a community house with my brother and some other friends, and trying to be as sustainable as we could. It was totally off-grid, but they delivered the lumber. And I thought, my God, that's a whole forest. And every time anybody's building a house, it's another big chunk of a forest. So what could we do different? And the friend that was helping me build the house, he and I ended up starting Bamboo Living together that next year. Again, we've got a huge problem. Concrete and steel are responsible for up to 17% of global CO2 emissions. And wood is, there's 18 million acres of deforestation still happening every year. And so it's a big, big deal. So that's where I think bamboo, and I know bamboo, can play a significant role. You can go to the next slide. The giant bamboos are the fastest growing woody plant, and as a result of that, really the fastest carbon sequestration, at least the natural one on Earth. 10 times faster than trees. And I was asked recently to back up those numbers, and it ends up that it's even higher when you look at pine for the East Coast. So it's a phenomenally fast-growing plant, reaching 100 feet in a few months. For the mature clump. Clump takes about 6 to 8 years to mature, but once it's mature, it's, as Bobby said, you're getting new shoots every year. Next slide. So the other thing about it is it's a technically superior material. On a weight basis, it's about 2.5 times the strength of steel. The steel's maybe twice as strong on a cross-sectional area, but it weighs 5 times as much, and that becomes critical when you're looking at large structures. Again, the carbon drawdown potential is tremendous. And regenerative, as Bobby said, that it's a pioneering plant, and also you don't need as much land. And then our early tests with the bamboo, we ended up with a Class A fire rating, so it was quite significant, as compared to wood, which is typically about Class C. So on the carbon credit side, we've been planting like crazy the last number of years, and moving forward, we even in the middle of COVID, we planted about 1,200 acres, and we just recently signed a carbon credit contract to plant tens of thousands of acres in the Philippines, and we are working on, the geotagging, RFID, and the kinds of things that Bobby's talking about for tracking it. And then we've already had our first big sale to one of the Fortune 100 companies for millions of tons of carbon, and we want to grow that to the gigaton scale. that's when we start having a big impact on the climate. Next. So our project in the Philippines is working. We've got 2 indigenous tribes that have been working with us there, and actually they're introducing us to other tribes. They have gotten their ancestral titles to the land, so they're wonderful partners to work with in terms of being able to help them bring employment. It's interesting is when we looked at our project in the Philippines, we actually address all 17 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and I don't know of any other project that's doing that. So our nurseries are being run by women. Our indigenous partners, the bamboo is being used to address a catastrophic flooding. They lost about 2,000 people in the last big flood, and so they've been planting like crazy with the giant bamboo upstream. What had happened was they deforested their island, and selling the logs pretty much to the U.S. and Europe. I grew up in a house that was panelized with Philippine mahogany, and so it could have been from right where we're working. And what they found was that the loss of the forest changed their local climate. It became drier. Grasses came in and took over, and now they have these brush fires during the dry season, and it's been killing all the little trees except for the bamboo. So for the last 20 years, they've been planting the giant bamboo to try to reforest their island, and it's really, having a very positive effect. One of the things that happens is the bamboo grows; it shades out the running grasses, and then we're able to interplant with the native hardwoods, and so bring back some biodiversity to the area, and just improve the situation all around. Next. So what happened was we recently submitted an entry for the Carbon Drawdown X Prize, and so my task to myself was the first prize is $50 million. I thought, well, if I had $50 million, how would I solve the climate crisis? And I actually was able to do it. It took a little longer. It was by 2062. And what it was doing the same thing we're doing in the Philippines multiple times around the planet. It was right now, the deforestation is running at about 18 million acres a year. If we were able to plant, it's about 36 million to ends up being almost 100 million, depending on the way we're planting in the Philippines, it would be 100 million. The way we're planting in Florida, it would be about 36 million acres. It's a lot of land, but again, we're deforesting at 18 million acres a year, so it's not a huge amount of land. And turning all of that bamboo into building materials, you have enough building materials to replace 12.8% of global construction. And the impact of that is huge. So the direct lockup, this is something Bobby mentioned, was that, the building materials and the buildings themselves become the storage mechanism for the carbon. The piece with that is that you also there's huge impacts in terms of avoided emissions by not using concrete, steel, and wood. So you end up with this cumulative impact that's 37 gigatons annually once this plan is fully in place. And that would take us back to if fully extended throughout this century would take us back to a pre-industrial atmosphere by the end of the century, which is a phenomenal thing. So we're raising money on Start Engine right now. We're in discussions with some strategic investment groups, impact investors. We really want to get this thing up and rolling. We've submitted for the X Prize. We need all the help we can get getting it up and going. And the other wonderful thing is that Hawaii is the perfect location to do a big model project. Converting the old cane land and some of the old pineapple lands. We can start in the areas where there's lots of rainfall so that you don't need the irrigation. And then as those get established, you actually improve the rainfall. You kind of, what would I say, is you're increasing the annual rainfall over time. There was over in Ocean View, there was it's a kind of a local story that they cut down all of the adjacent native forest, and Ocean View dried out. And then they replanted it with mac nuts. And now that the mac nuts are mature, the rains are back in Ocean View. So it definitely, has a significant impact. So we want to get lots of bamboo planted in the state. What's interesting is our manufacturing expert, he used to run one of the largest plywood mills in the world, making millions of board feet of plywood. He was hired to come look at the eucalyptus out here that was all planted, north of Hilo. And he said it didn't really work very well. There were issues with it, but he became very familiar with the economics of, that kind of forestry and agriculture in Hawaii. And he said bamboo would work extremely well out here. To get an export market going, it would be mostly with engineered materials, but that's still a significant impact. And again, you get to use lots of bamboo in making that material. So
okay.
That's got it for me.
Thank you so much, David. I think obviously everything you've said shows the incredible claims to make for climate mitigation that are possible, along with the social benefits, as you mentioned, for the SDGs and interplanting of native hardwoods. We don't often think of bamboo as being something that has that kind of diversity. So thank you so much. I think if there's a really quick question, we can take it. Otherwise, I think hold your questions till the Q&A, because I can imagine you'll have several for David as well. So I'm not seeing anything. Deborah, can we move on to your presentation, please?
Thanks, Jeanette. And I'm honored to be part of this panel that's thinking big about solutions on the island. Wow. And I can't really talk about hempcrete without giving a brief nod to the Green Build movement, as it's a key part of my design and construction history. It had its roots in the US during the first oil embargo in the 1970s. In 1994, the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design standard was established by the US Green Building Council, and this created tools and criteria for measuring performance in new buildings. In 1999, a similar but more regionally focused built green standard was created, and then in 2009, the most stringent living building challenge was established that moved certification away from a point system for defining sustainability to a simple list of imperatives that must be met, and this raised the bar further towards restorative design. The core underlying principle of the Living Building Challenge is that buildings should mimic nature and natural systems, and the challenge uses the metaphor of the flower to illustrate this principle. Unlike typical buildings, a flower or tree has a place-based solution to meet all of its needs and to maintain balance with its surroundings. So imagine a home that is informed by its ecoregion's characteristic, a home whose materials come from what is locally available, that generates energy with renewable resource, captures and treats water, operates efficiently, and is a part of a larger community. This is the goal we should be moving towards in our built environment. Next, so why hempcrete? The effects of the climate crisis are impacting the entire planet, but the island nations are especially vulnerable. What if we could be part of the solution by contributing to carbon drawdown through our islands building methods? What if we could leave the trees in the ground where they're doing their job of sequestering carbon and instead build our island homes with plant materials that could be grown right here on the islands? When we decided to make the Big Island our home after being visitors for over 40 years, I immediately started looking at opportunities for sustainable building here, with the first question being, what are the local methods and materials that can be used in construction without the need for shipping these materials from 2,500 miles away? Hempcrete seemed a natural choice in both its ability to be grown and processed locally and because of its carbon sequestering attributes. Hempcrete checked all the boxes for a sustainable building material. And in this illustration, you'll see, as Bobby mentioned, an abundance of uses for the hemp plant. Here's just a few key attributes. It's now legal to grow industrial hemp in Hawaii, and it takes about 1.5 acres or one crop to produce the amount of hurd required for an average size home. It's a carbon sequestering material, meaning it sequesters more carbon than is used in its processing. It stores from 2 to 4 tons of CO2 per acre in its 90-day growth cycle. It acts as a phytoremediator, as David mentioned, on damaged soil, cleaning and drawing out industrial chemicals and heavy metals. Once it's installed in the walls, the biocomposites continue to sequester carbon during the curing process. Along with bamboo, it's a rapidly renewable resource, allowing for 2 to 3 crops per year. And the combination of the lime and hemp particles creates a flexible, hygroscopic, or breathable matrix that eliminates mold buildup in the building. Alkaline materials such as what is in hempcrete is naturally repellent to insects such as termites, and it has a negative effect on their skin, which deters them from eating or nesting in the material. It has been certified as fireproof in Canada and Europe for quite some time, but only recently in the US was it finally tested by the ASTM laboratories, and on a scale of 0 to 450 for flame spread and smoke, hempcrete achieved 0 in both categories. And even though industrial hemp is in the same plant species as cannabis, it contains less than 0.3% THC, whereas normal cannabis has from 7.5 to 10% or higher. So, and there's always jokes about, can we get high on our house? Can we smoke it? And the answer is no. So in addition to the outer fiber, which can be used for paper, rope, textiles, and insulation, while the leaves and seeds can be turned into food or biofuels. David touched on the harvesting, but I just wanted to go briefly over it. I'm not an expert in the growing, but harvesting usually begins when the plants are in early bloom, which is approximately 10 to 12 weeks after planting the seed. There are 3 stages of the process. Once the plant has reached maturity, the first one harvesting, second retting or drying, and third decortication, which is the separation of the core or the hurd from the outer fiber. This can be done by hand, but because of the fiber's strength, pulling it from the stalks takes a lot of manual force. So today's technology allows hemp crops to be harvested and processed by decortication equipment that is advanced enough to take care of the careful separation of the seeds and leaves from the outer hemp fiber and the inner stalk or hurd, which is then used for hempcrete. These are the ingredients in hempcrete. It's very simple. Hemp hurd, which is the biofiber material and needs to be dust-free and 1/2 to 1 inch in length. Then a calcium carbonate lime binder, which is a hydraulic lime that sets with water instead of air. And lastly, water. And lime currently has to be imported to the island, but here on the Big Island, there's a new company called Hemidol that is extracting ocean lime as a byproduct of desalinization and reverse osmosis. This is very exciting because it would complete the full island sourcing for the raw materials and would remove the large carbon footprint of traditional lime binders. The final mix is 1 part hurd, 1.5 parts lime binder, and 1.5 parts water. It is then either poured in place, so you can see on the left the mixing of the hemp hurd. The upper right is pouring it in place with batter boards that hold the hemp until it's set, and then they can be moved up. Hemp block, which is a pre-manufactured block and can be stacked just like masonry, or using a spray foam or a spray installation. Next, a company I've partnered with on other hempcrete projects, Natural Homes Canada, also uses a panelized method in which hempcrete homes can be built in an assembly area and then transported to a final site, which you'll see them moving the house and adding the roof once it gets to the site. Next, we're also researching the potential for 3D printing with hempcrete. The advantage of 3D printing is reduced labor requirements, and since there's seems to be a labor shortage on the island, the printers can produce one home a day if the designs are simple. So when I was approached by the owner to collaborate in the design and permitting of the Highland Hemp House in Bellingham, Washington, which would be the first hempcrete home in the state, I jumped on the opportunity because of the sustainable and carbon sequestering qualities of hempcrete. In reviewing the complexity and size of the proposed hempcrete addition, I suggested instead of taking on this large project that we start with a smaller structure that wouldn't require permits as an initial proof of concept. We were able to problem solve a lot of detailing like window buckouts, electrical chases, hempcrete floors on this garden hut, which now operates as an ADU, and then felt more confident to move on to the larger home. So at the top right of these images, you'll see a rendering of the proposed addition with all the 2- and 3-story areas representing the new hempcrete construction. It took more than a year to complete this hempcrete addition, but this was partly because there was a number of educational training workshops that were conducted for working with this material. The permitting was challenging since we were the first permitted project in the state, but the building officials were willing to work with us, and there was a lot of good press that came out of the project, both for the use of this sustainable and low carbon material, as well as for our collaboration with the building department. It should be noted that there has been a lot of support in Hawaii County for using this material, and there has also been one hempcrete home, I believe, in the state permitted on Maui, so that paves the way for future permitting. So I wanted to show you a little bit about the process. Here you'll see images of the stored bags of hurd. This project was built around 5 years ago, and it was just before industrial hemp was legalized in the state, so we had to import it from over the border in Canada. On the right, you'll see the hemp walls that are going up with the form boards at the top, ready for the next section of hempcrete installation. Hempcrete has a value of R2 per inch, so in the Northwest, walls need to be 12 inches thick to meet energy codes, but here in Hawaii, they can be 6 to 8 inches. Hempcrete can bear its own weight, but is not considered structural, so the structural and lateral loads depend on the use of wood, wall studs, post beam construction, or possibly hybrid with bamboo, which I look forward to exploring a little bit more. Hempcrete is not suitable for bearing in the ground. The Highland Hemp House was built on an existing foundation, but on another zero carbon project I'm designing, we're using a hybrid system where the foundation is constructed with a material called fast wall, which can be buried, and then we switch to hempcrete once the stem wall is above grade. And it's also possible to use a frame floor system on pin pilings as a method to avoid the use of concrete in the foundation. These are some images of the Highland Hemp House interior, just to show the warmth of the finished interior space. The hemp exterior and interior is finished with a lime plaster and has the feeling of any type of mass wall similar to adobe or rammed earth. So in exploring the proof of concept for using hempcrete on the Big Island, I put together a simple, very simple 1-bedroom, 648 square foot modular design to research costs, just as a starting place to start getting some information. And I focused on the hempcrete wall assembly. I didn't get prices yet for roofs or other site considerations. But at the time that I was doing my research, and I know that this is changing, especially in hearing what Bobby's talking about, there was no available industrial hemp on the island. So I had to look into importing. So I checked into both loose hemp and also hemp block, and both prices, including shipping of the material and the labor, came in at about $40,000 for a house of this size. And in talking to my group in Canada, who are building quite a few homes right now, they said, the range is from 250 to 300 a square foot, depending on, of course, the size of the home and the finishes. So when we look to the indigenous wisdom of these beautiful and remote islands, what we find in pre-contact times was a thriving and sustainable culture of over 1 million people who, of course, didn't rely on imports of any material or food. Radical indigenism teaches us to learn from the past, from nature-based solutions, while looking to the future with the knowledge that decisions we're making today will impact the future generations. Affordable and sustainable homes should be part of the solution to our climate crisis. And it is our kuleana to the land and people who choose to call this island their home to shift the bar towards a more sustainable future by embracing island-grown homes built with materials from the island like hempcrete and bamboo. Mahalo, and I'll look forward to any additional questions or comments you might have during the question and answer period.
Thank you so much, Deb. Wow. Incredible to think and to follow up from Bobby on, again, 3D printing, producing a house a day and taking it. This is really inspirational. And I've got chicken skin just listening to all of you. So I hope the rest of you do as well. This is just phenomenal stuff. Okay. Any quick questions again for clarification to Deb? Okay, if not, hold your questions. We'll have time later. Now, Neal, I'm going to move on to you. Boy, after hearing these three unbelievable, incredible, innovative people talk about what could be done here, I really do believe the three of you sound like global leaders in this kind of innovation. I mean, I'm just incredible. I feel like we're incredibly blessed to have you on this island. How do you, as the building department, support all of this, or do you? So go ahead, please.
Aloha. Good afternoon. Neal Tanaka, Acting Deputy Building Chief for the Department of Public Works Building Division. I appreciate the invite to kind of talk about our processes and or qualification of materials that align with the building code. And so, thank you, David. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Bobby, for providing this information of what's possibly out there as alternatives to the standard brick and mortar wood standard construction. I think the building codes are prescribed as establishing the minimum requirements for public health and safety, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean it's forward thinking. And so if you would go to the next slide. And one more after that, please. Although they are not necessarily forward thinking, they are also open to alternative materials. And this is a provision from our Hawaii County Code, which is derived from the building codes, where provisions of the building codes are not intended to prevent the installation of any type of material, or prohibit any design or method for construction. However, as the building codes are the minimum requirement for standards for materials and methods, we would need to qualify those new materials so that at least they meet the equivalent of the prescribed quality and strength and effectiveness, fire resistance, durability with respect to safety. And so we do have a process at the building division on helping to qualify these materials, of which research reports supporting data similar to what has already been provided today as examples of such documentation and support material to qualify these materials are submitted to us for review. We do have our colleagues in our other jurisdictions of the County of Maui, City and County of Honolulu, that we do discuss the ups and downs and challenges or none with regards to materials that they have qualified for use. So in order to qualify or at least get the evaluation by us, please do reach out to us by way of email or coming into our office, and we can discuss what is further needed to help qualify that material. Okay, so next page. So as I mentioned, the building codes, the IBC International Building Code and the International Residential Code are both the minimum standards. And each code identifies materials and what further standards that are needed to qualify such material or the manufacturing of the material. For example, here, Chapter 23 of the IBC, it discusses the acceptable standards for the manufacturing of wood or wood-based products, including provisions for sizes, grades, quality control, and certification programs or similar methods of identification. What we were talking about as possible solutions, as presented by David, would fall under maybe round timber poles and piles as defined by section 2303.112, where the minimum standard to meet that round timber pole would be required. Of course, this is something that would require a little bit of discussion and investigation by both parties to identify what actually applies, what provisions of the code apply. There are similar chapters for concrete, chapter 19 of the IBC, which refers to the ACI standard, American Concrete Institute standard. Masonry also, which is the Masonry Society, has standards that qualify those materials. Hemp, based on the presentation today, is very versatile. So some of the standards that would apply to that would be for Chapter 8, the interior finishes, or maybe even Chapter 7. With regards to Chapter 7, flame spread indexing. So, David did speak to that, Class A versus Class C. And so ultimately what we want to try to do when we qualify these materials is to make sure that they do at least meet or exceed what has already been tested to these standards. Okay, so the next slide. However, we rarely get new materials to be evaluated by us or qualified, right? One of them actually is the bamboo product that David spoke of by Living Bamboo. He had mentioned that he went through the International Code Council evaluation services, which generate a report based on the standards and testing that are required for that type of material. And if you need more information on the ICC evaluation program, I provided a link there. You can provide another link in the chat as well. But I'd like to show you what that report looks like. So the next slide, please. What this report is, and David mentioned it was time consuming, but it definitely lays out what codes the material complies to. It also identifies the uses and the description of the species of the bamboo, what sizes of the bamboo are qualified per this report. Right? It talks about the design and installation requirements for the material, the design considerations for that material. It also goes into the conditions of use for that material. And then further finalizing the report by identifying the production facility of where that material is being sourced from. In this case, it was Vietnam, as David had mentioned, and as being a proprietary material to the Bamboo Technologies LLC. So this is a pretty comprehensive report for which David had to go through in order to qualify that material as a qualified building material. Next slide, please. So, in summary, like I said, the building codes present that minimum standard. And I'm excited to hear more about hempcrete and the bamboo and the structural integrity of both materials and any other further materials that come through the county to ensure that we're building safe homes and our structures in our county. So, it was a quick and dirty presentation, but if you do have any further questions, please do reach out to us at the Department of Public Works and Building Division. And we can give you more information as to how to look into qualifying that material. The Department of Public Works doesn't necessarily administer agricultural farming. And so raw material in itself isn't something that we qualify. As you saw, it's the processes and the manufacturing that have to meet specific standards as well as the labeling and where that material is being sourced from. It's a holistic evaluation of that material. And so it's really a 1-2 part system, maybe even a third part when it comes to the homeowners and builders and designers that need to understand what the limitations are of those materials. And you can reach out to us to see if a certain material has been qualified as approved. We'd be happy to provide you that information as well. If it hasn't been approved, it would be a good idea to research the company, the manufacturer, to see if that material has gone through a listing service such as the ICC evaluation service. And then bring that packet into us for us to either evaluate that or provide further consideration for that material. So again, thank you. I appreciate you guys' support in looking for sustainable solutions out of our county. We align with the mayor's goals, the county's goals to find those types of solutions and work with the community as a whole to build a better built environment. So I appreciate you guys' attention. Mahalo.
Thank you. Thanks, Neal.
Thank you so much, Neal. I think all of us feel fortunate to have you in the building department and to know that you're ready and willing to help get all of these technologies approved and help whoever's promoting them to work their way through the system to make that happen. So thank you very much for the role you play in this as well. Okay, Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you for a Q&A session.
Great. Thanks, Jeanette. Got a bunch of questions here. Let me start with a question for, I guess, all three panelists, other than Neal. Any banking issues with hemp, or is it an all-cash business?
I don't know right now, but I do know of a house that is in early stages of groundwork that's going to be built down around Ocean View, and it'll be going through the county process, and it'll probably be made out of the blocks. Actually, we're going to be going down and look at the site on Friday. It's a very, very experienced builder who's fired up about it. Has built many houses in Kukio, Waialae, that kind of thing, Manalani. I don't know, but that's a great question, and I would be able to do a follow up and find out from the builder how they're getting bonded and where what are the lending protocols.
Great, Deb or David, any other responses?
There weren't issues in Washington State, but I don't know about the banks here in Hawaii if they'd have issues with such a new material. But I imagine you could find a forward-thinking banking institution, especially since, it helps that there's already been a house built in the islands. I think that that's sort of already a proof of concept in the state.
And with the existing company, the Bamboo Living, those buildings can be both financed and insured. So it's pretty straightforward. And with the new company, the goal with that is to, again, take that engineered lumber and panels and subfloors and all of that through the code process. So we would have a similar report to that ESR that you saw. We've already gotten the bid for it. It's not inexpensive and it does take time, but we're working on putting the financing together to get that started.
Great,
and
thank you.
We'll actually have the material to start that process early next year.
Great. A couple questions for Neal here. Deb mentioned there's a hempcrete home in Maui, and this may pave the way for permitting to help on our island as well. Is that the case, Neal? Do you look to other islands for a proof of concept?
We do. We, as I mentioned, we do have our colleagues over in the county of Maui, as well as City County Honolulu and the county of Kauai, that we do have these discussions to understand the challenges that they had seen when trying to qualify the material. As they're a valuable resource because some further test data that they found in the field or were received by way of submittal can also supplement the data that we have to evaluate that material.
Thank you. And then also for Neal, is the process you have in place already at the county transparent and predictable in terms of cost and timelines for getting new materials qualified?
I think that we are always trying to improve our processes. I think transparency is something that we strive for at the Department of Public Works as well as in the building division. I think our new permitting process shows that transparency. But as we work to develop new processes and and streamline that. It's definitely a work in progress. So the quick answer to that is we're working towards that goal. Absolutely.
Great. And then one final question for Neal. What specific uses are now allowed for bamboo in our county in light of the ICC process that David went through?
So Dave, as I mentioned, that ICC ESR is specific to Dave's company, and there are specific requirements for design considerations, as well as connections. And we've seen houses from his company go up throughout the island. We have seen some exterior materials, as well as interior engineered hardwood floors for bamboo as qualified. So there are some materials that we do see out there, but rarely are they coming in mass quantity.
Okay. Switching gears a little bit. Heather says, one of the issues I'm always concerned about is the balance between the economy of scale that would make growing hemp or bamboo viable and the impacts of large monoculture crops. How do we avoid that kind of mess again?
Sure, I can jump in with that. So one of the pieces, there's an efficiency in harvesting in terms of organizing the way things are planted. But at the same time I'm an environmentalist, and that's why I'm doing this. So what we're doing in the Philippines is we're using our plantings to interplant. So we've been doing satellite imaging and now drone imaging to be able to find deforested areas and get the bamboo into those areas, and wherever there is intact forest, leaving that intact forest untouched, and when there's not, is adding hardwoods to the mix so that you actually end up with a diverse forest again. And the nice thing with the clumping bamboo is it does stay put, so you can it can be part of a diverse ecosystem.
I wanted to add to that. I talked with Jill Wagner, who's part of Terraformations, who are trying to replant 1 trillion trees on our planet. But she felt like at least hemp, we didn't talk about bamboo, would be a great crop to grow with the trees. That it had a lot of benefits that would help, especially in the early stages with the trees. So that's nice to know. It doesn't have to be a monoculture.
Can I add in a little something, Tam?
Go ahead.
In South America, there are large forests of bamboo, as there are in China. Mm-hmm. Imagine that this is a runner, sympodial bamboo, so it spreads. This is where the panda bears are eating. They're not eating clumping bamboo, right? These are vast forests. They are diverse ecosystems. The same thing in Colombia and same thing in Ecuador. These are just guadua, let's say guadua angustifolia, which is a type of bamboo that it spreads a little bit. It's scary because it spreads a little bit. The runners run crazy. This moves slowly, but over time, it forms a big forest and they space out. The amount of bird life, the amount of mammals, the amount of reptiles that are in there, insects, it's not a monoculture. Bamboo is a different type of a way of thinking. We're planting soybeans, we're planting corn, and we're extracting, right? We're extracting. Like you don't leave a row of corn when you harvest it. You take it all. You don't leave a row of soybeans. You take it all. In bamboo, we're taking 7 or 8 poles out of 15 or 17 every year, and so it's a fascinating plant. And I don't want you to think if you're planting clumping bamboo that it truly is a monoculture thinking, because it's a renewable thing that's pouring carbon in. It's producing so much, but there's bird life, there's butterflies, there's insects, there's moisture. It's a much longer term thing than just thinking a monoculture is something that you take out generally every year as well. So there's a tremendous amount of legacy soil damage, if you will, with harvesting and removing the product every year from it. So you're mining, in a sense, with monoculture. You're reverse mining with bamboo and hemp. You're pumping.
Right. So these crops are obviously really promising. So thinking, big picture here, what are the key barriers to achieving the dreams you three have outlined for the Big Island?
Land access, water, manpower, and will, which obviously translates into some funding. The knowledge is here. Plans are here. I mean, I have plans for, massive ones. I've talked with David about it, worked with him and his company here. And I'm like, I've actually put this Zoom meeting off I was with Hector today. I'm working on a project here to develop a way to process the bamboo here and develop the technology here in Kohala because we have the bamboo. So that's what we need is this think group and other people like this that are able to support it. We have the knowledge, we have the plants, we have the species here. We have Mahipono just bought, 42,000 acres in Maui, right? And we have 30,000 acres of former cane land here in Hamakua. And I think that there's a little bit of will.
Yeah, I think identifying the areas to grow, like you're saying, but it's also a leap of faith, I think, for a lot of farmers to switch over from crops that are producing an income right now, like medicinal marijuana, to switch over to industrial hemp when the markets aren't there yet. So it's almost like they have to grow together, so that we get a horizontal use of all the products, but it takes investment money to be able to do the processing and then to guarantee that, paper companies will want to include it and to get people to commit to building homes so that we can prove that this is, a great way to build. I'm super excited about combining bamboo and the strength of bamboo with the insulation and other qualities of hemp. I think it would be a great combination, and the fact that they can both be grown on the island is like so exciting to me. But I think it's hard because it takes time, and we don't really have time, do we? I mean, things have to happen now. So hopefully, there's enough interest and excitement that the next levels will happen, and we can start exploring both bamboo and industrial hemp in a way that benefits everyone.
David, care to add to that?
Sure. I think one of the pieces is kind of initial seed funding to put a pilot project together here would be incredible. I know, Bobby, you've been working towards that, and the outside financial help is always greatly appreciated.
I think education is the key where I'm thinking differently than what Deborah had mentioned about like trying to get the pot growers to grow hemp. They're crushing it. They're making money. They're high, whatever the case may be. That's their own thing. This is a different thing. I want to go to the schools. I want to go to the kids who want to go into technology. They want to go into map making. Some of the kids are obviously rancher kids. They're awesome. They love to be outside. They don't want to be inside. Then there's gamer kids who come in and they help us on the 3D printing and on the plastics and on the model making and other aspects. It's an integrated approach from education. It has to start with education, and it has to start with the youth in the schools. They're going to be the next farmers.
Right.
It's not going to be the old timers. They're not going to stop selling their calves to the mainland and grow hemp. But I think that there's a tremendous amount, especially with the Hawaii Island School Garden Network. We've got HISNA. We've got this movement, and they're like, what's next? What do I grow next? And we need to serve the table.
Mm-hmm. And I love that idea too of educating the kids and then keeping them on the island with good jobs, good and real work.
Good housing.
Good housing. Yeah, they can grow and build their own homes.
And a place to live.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of funding, do you see any congressional funding coming down, either from bills already passed or the BBB bill that may help in this space? It's
just not my realm, bro. I wouldn't be the one that would need the technical support. Needs to come from someone. I'm out on the street more than that.
Yeah, there's a Department of Energy funding that's just recently been announced that could be something that we could get access to a pilot program here. related to sequestration using building materials. So, bamboo and hemp would be both ideal for that.
Right. Question for David. You set up your business currently in the Philippines, also in Vietnam. Could those models be replicated here on the Big Island? And you're working on doing that already?
Sure. Yeah. We actually have a program in Florida where we're in the process of expanding that with partners from the citrus industry. The industry was decimated by diseases, so they've been looking for replacement crops for several years now. And the bamboo is outperforming anybody's expectations. So they're, doing what I would call is basically 100 acres this year to be able to have the propagation material to expand rapidly into thousands.
And is the limiting factor here in Hawaii and on the Big Island the typical land costs, labor costs, those barriers?
No. Well, what's interesting is it doesn't. The agricultural leases can be pretty reasonable. And what's fascinating with the carbon credit program is in the Philippines we don't own any of the land that we're planting on. So we're supporting the indigenous tribes by sharing that carbon revenue and using that carbon money to get the planting done, get the maintenance done, and get them to the place where they can harvest. And then at that point, we offtake the material and provide jobs for the harvesting and for the processing. So it's a really wonderful thing that, again, can run for multi-generations, because that one plant can live 100 years and be supporting great grandkids.
I would say the labor scale is a huge difference between Mindanao and Big Island, as even
for sure.
Buy a house in Dade County or something versus try to buy a house in Waimea versus the carbon credit going for $10 a ton or something in that neighborhood, and that the daily wage in Mindanao in that region is $3 a day versus here all my contractor buddies pay their laborers that show up every day $30 an hour now for solid construction labor. So the scale is significant for us to be able to. That's why I think it starts with the youth, and we do the education, and we suss out who's coming to the after school programs, who wants to do this, and support that. And that's kind of, I think, the incubator starts there. And I've already built 5 outdoor bamboo classrooms with kids around at different schools in the island over the last 10 years. And some of the kids got into green engineering, green architecture, right? I think that's my push, is that these incubator and this first test pilot, maybe a 50-acre bamboo plantation, and a discovery center and a tech lab of some sort, partnered with a school, maybe even up here, would be a proof of concept, something that we could really then use as a model to learn from.
Yeah, as Bobby said, the economics are dramatically different for working here, and even more so from here to Florida and then from here to the Philippines. So, but what was interesting is Joe, again, the manufacturing expert, had said that the economics for Hawaii will work, but it's for engineered materials, so it has to be fairly hands off. We're working on developing a mechanical harvesting process for Florida right now, and that would need to be implemented here to make everything work out cost wise. But it was pretty exciting. I was assuming that he would say that it's just the economics would be too difficult here. But like I said, he had done an in-depth dive into the eucalyptus, so he knew the island economics quite well, and said that we can have a very successful, viable industry here, but it is as Bobby said, is very different than what you would set up in Mindanao.
Well, speaking of eucalyptus, you all know that we have large stands on Cam School's land on Hamakua Coast. Would that land be appropriate for growing bamboo and hemp?
Bobby, you might speak to this, but my understanding is that the oils from the eucalyptus make it very difficult to get anything else to grow for a while. That there would have to be some sort of a transitional process. I think it would be much easier just to look at old cane land and there's plenty of that.
It's an allelopathic exudate from these. These are not like a globulus is the grandis species, and they don't really make that oil. It's actually a hormone that they do, and it breaks down. You could break it down with compost tea. I'm for planting them, the grandis plantations, the other 10,000 acres, and with bamboo, because I have my farm in Puelo Malcas right on there. And so we played with that stuff, and I looked at, when they cut the trees down, they didn't dig the roots out. So I started looking at technology, and there's a machine that you pull behind a tractor, and it actually uses a lever and a pinch mechanism, and it rips out the root ball. And then you throw in a tub grinder, and you've got your mulch, right? And then you add a little worm compost and some tea, and you break that hormone down, and your bamboo's growing. So that's what I tried to get KS to do, but they're just poisoning them. So they cut them off. They didn't want them to coppice to come back up, so they poisoned them all right by me. But that's a technology we're ready for. The hemp, I think, would be better lower, and we're going to need to irrigate that in the beginning more, I think, than the bamboo does, as you know, well better even up higher where it's a little cooler and a little damper. And once we get the tree system going, we'll get the clouds back, and then we get the rain going. Then we can, but I think the hemp would be better in a more flatter area where there's more tractor access. Once the bamboo's planted, we're not going to be going in there very often. But the hemp's going to need a little bit more maintenance, and 2 or 3 crops a year, you're going to need to be able to get in and out. So being like this or being more like that, yeah.
Got it. Question for Debbie. So you mentioned that the construction cost for hempcrete homes is about $250 to $300 per square foot. How does that compare to standard construction costs for Hawaii?
Well, I've only been here a year, but I've seen the costs anywhere from $200 a square foot to $1,000. So if we're talking about affordable housing, and maybe somebody else has more experience with this, but it seems like we need to keep it around 150 or 2. But I'd like to think that there's a way that we don't have to sacrifice sustainable materials to create affordable housing. They should be able to go hand in hand somehow. And I don't know. Does anybody know how 250 a square foot compares here on the island?
A nice 4-bedroom, 1,500 square foot HPM with up level, a little bit better fixtures. You're with concrete costs right now at 190, a cubic yard, and the transportation, the shipping, the new Young Brothers, you're talking about $350 a square foot for a well-built home. So I just got prices recently for some.
It's that import that, is such a big factor, both in terms of pollution and what we're trying to do in drawing down carbon and not shipping things in. But I hear that one container, a 40-foot container, went from $5,000 to $15,000 in the last 3 years, according to the people who are going to be sending the hemp over. So, that's crazy. And if it keeps going that way, it'll just go up and up. So I think eventually, yes, we can bring the cost down, especially relative to bringing materials in. We have to prove it. We got to do it and prove it.
And shifting gears to food production, you all mentioned food potential from both hemp and bamboo. Can you speak a bit more? I guess this would be a question for David or Bobby primarily, a bit more to the food potential on our island from these crops.
Well, we could get from each clump, let's just use a rough number of 125 clumps per acre. Let's say we take 6 large fat bamboo shoots, a foot tall, 4 inches in diameter. You're talking about 5 pounds. And we used to make them into pickles. I got a recipe from an old Japanese master in Hilo, and they were just delicious. And we canned them. They were gone. The interns ate them all. All my farm interns ate them. I mean, these are gone. When the Manalani chefs came to Hamakua for one of our farm expos, and they made these bamboo shoots, there were none left. There was a lot of other poo-poos where they were kind of there, but these were, and I just realized then, I'm like, oh, I got to get more and more into this. So this is, if you're thinking, I'm thinking, maybe 100 pounds of shoots per clump times 125 times 500 acres. And then you create a canning operation. This is kind of a vision I had down at Heine Mill when I was building a whole tech park down there at Hamakua. That we have a cannery. It's all solar operated. We have a microgrid. We're running the logs. You got to use those trees that are on the CAM schools land, the grandest trees, the big old ones run through a K2 Hundegger mill into a timber frame, and you've got your timber frame, right? Then the roots come out, then the bamboo and the hemp, and the other crops can go back in. I mean, we need more than just those two. But that was my imagination, is we would create an entire, and then you make sriracha ones, you make garlic ones, and where do they go? They go into school lunch program, right? This is how it all ties. It all ties together in my crazy head. But this is kind of, that's the place. And the Heine Mill, the old sugar mill down there, that is just such a possibility. There's enough methane to run that plant next door that's burning 10,000 gallon, a day trucks of naphtha right now. And there's probably enough methane in the bagasse pile. There's 1.9 million cubic yards right there of bagasse, 29 acres there. And there's a lot of potential to interweave and do the processing down there. There's lands adjacent to it, and the Hamakua ditch has still got the water. So I think that's kind of the breadbasket. I would love to pull it up to Kohala, where my new home is up here, where I moved up to, but we don't have the ditch anymore. Well, the Kohala ditch is down. So having that water, that lower cost, good quality ag water, is a problem. So Hamakua is moved up in my mind, and I think that bamboo could just go right into the school program, and we could make it something that the kids are just love grinding on, and it's so good for you. So.
Great. David, anything to add to that?
My focus has been on the building materials. It's always great to hear that other aspect, Bobby. So thank you. Yeah. And it is good to see the whole big picture of kind of educating the next generation and getting that interest level engaged early with where we would really like to see ourselves go.
And for hemp, what are the main food products from hemp, and how are they produced, and can they be produced here in Hawaii?
The seed and then the oil. And if you just could do a quick Google search of what is the current market cap of hemp seed as a protein supplement, as a crunchy. I mean, you can read Doug Fine's book. I mean, he's having hemp seed every day. They got hemp you can look and just go to the health food store in Hilo or Pahoa or worse, Waimea, and look at the cost of hemp seed. It'll blow your mind. And that oil, it's just so good. And it's so good for you. It's really high in all the omegas. And and those are readily available. I mean, probably somebody here has seen someone maybe grow some pop back in the day. And when it goes to seed, I mean, you got a ton of seed, right? And then they press the seed and they get the oil. So there's just it's untapped, really, the potential for us. And we're importing it all here. I wonder how much we're importing to every health food store and Costco. The hemp hearts, yeah.
Great. Thanks so much. We're out of time, so let's turn it back to Jeanette.
I'm just sitting here astounded by what all of you have to say. And it's just like you said, Bobby, painting the whole picture of it. The potential is just enormous. And I hope there's some people in this audience or who are interested in this topic so that we can find some way to take this all forward and to support all of the innovation that you guys are involved in. I'm really, really impressed. And I want to thank all of you hugely for this amazingly informative webinar. I hope we hear from more of the audience who feels the same way. We will be sending out the recording of this as well as all the slides to anybody who's registered. And also, I hope that we can include, with your permission, we will include the ways to contact all of these 4 presenters, and we encourage everybody to do so. I think from our side, I speak on behalf of Think Big Hawaii. I think this is something we will also be carrying forward and thinking of how can we support this and what needs to happen to make all these dreams a reality. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone who's been on this webinar, everyone who's participated, the Think Big Hawaii team, and Noel and Tom and Heather, and thanks all to all of you, and we'll be in touch soon.